My name is Pete, and welcome to my garage. All right, I'm sure you're happy to see me. Here we have a 4L80E transmission, which means that it has 4 forward gears. The L represents longitudinal, so it's rear-wheel drive, and the 80 means that it's its strength, right? So we have our 4L60E, which the 60 indicates its torque capacity. Now we have the 80E, so this is going to be a bigger, heavier, stronger transmission, and trust me, it's definitely heavier. So, what we have here, this is an early 80E, and the reason I can tell that it's an early 80E, as you can see, are 2 Trainee cooler lines. The cooler lines are right here next to each other. The newer 80Es, I believe it takes this one, and it moves it to pretty much, I think, that spot right there. I believe they think they needed some better lubrication back here at the back of the transmission as they went through this. Now, as you can see here, it's a service replacement transmission assembly. That is what SRTA stands for. Service Replacement Transmission Assembly, SRTA. Not CERTA like I have seen, but as an SRTA. We will notice on the 4L80E, this is an old, you can tell this is old because our shifter here, it had a big old rod through there, and it's something that mounted to the body of the truck, and that shifted this versus our newer style that uses a cable. I'm going to convert this to a cable style. Also, the 80E used an input shaft speed sensor and also an output shaft speed sensor, and the connector looks like a 4L60E, but it has an extra couple pins for this input speed sensor. That's the only difference in the connection between the 60E. All right, and then on some of these, so this is a 2-wheel drive tail housing, but you can see we have a yoke on here for a U-joint. So the drive shaft actually had the slip joint in it instead of this. But from what I understand, and we'll check this out, we can remove the bolt, pull the slip yoke off, or the slip yoke, pull the yoke off, and then you have a normal output shaft that sticks out that you can just put a normal transmission slip drive shaft in with a slip yoke setup. And since on the BMW it's independent rear, so the rear end's not bouncing up and down, pulling in and out on that shaft, it's just going to pretty much remain stationary. I'm pretty sure whenever I put this in a BMW's transmission tunnel, I'm probably going to have to trim off kind of this ear right here, which you can see once we can see where it mounts to the engine there, and underneath, there was a plate that went under the torque converter, an inspection plate. I don't think it'll be a big deal if I cut that ear off. And then over here on this side, you can see we have another ear that is pretty much pointless, and then I can probably chop that off if I have to. And I think you do on the 5 Series in order to fit it in the Trainee tunnel. So the first couple things I'm going to have to do, I'm going to end up draining this. All right, so I'm going to drain the transmission, and I'm going to remove this yoke from the end. I'll flip it up, and then we're going to check the end plate. We didn't have to do this on the 6-speed transmissions, but we will have to do it on the 4-speed to make sure it has the correct thrust washers. And so we'll watch this while you'll see it while I do it. You'll see it while I do it. Bucket to catch the fluid. See what size this is. Nailed it. Yes, I still use air tools. I like air tools. All right, this yoke should come right off. I hope. Right off, no big deal. You might have to use a yoke puller. Okay, as you can see, this is pretty much like a slip yoke, but it just bolts to the end. And now it just looks like a normal transmission. Just, you can see it's a threaded hole in the end, and so I can use a normal slip yoke on there. I'm gonna zip these bolts out. They appear to be metric, probably 15 millimeters. I'll take those out and take the extension housing off. Now I have no clue as to what the history of this transmission is, other than it's an early 4L80E and it was a Serta. So whatever vehicle it was in before, it had to be replaced. So hopefully I got a good one. I bought this off a guy off Facebook Marketplace for $100. So I figure, I plan on going through it anyway. Is $100 worth it? For a 4L80, it seems like a deal to me. And the mount, see ya. The mount that was on there is gone. Trainee mount's gone, but the bracket's still there, but it's sayonara, sucker. So a lot of people will just take a 4L80E, just run it like it is. But man, since I have absolutely no clue as to what the history is of this thing, I'm at least going to tear it down and take a look at it. Not to mention, you guys get to learn about it. From the factory, they put an O-ring right there to keep the tranny fluid from going through that yoke, because that yoke goes all the way through. You can see it right there. Now a slip yoke, usually this will be left loose, or there won't be an O-ring right there, and then it'll fill up the end of that slip yoke with tranny fluid. So that's okay. I'm not even sure if there's fluid in this thing, but we'll see. Oh yeah. Okay. I'm assuming this thing is like well over, as far as the fluid goes, I think it's probably well over 10 to 15 years that it's even been since it's ran. But thing still has fluid in it, and the fluid actually looks pretty decent. Man, this thing has an old pan that's going to need some cleanup, and it got dented up pretty good. Not a huge fan of how dented this pan is. It better not be a drain plug. It wasn't leaking. Kind of weird. I might have to source a little better pan for this. I don't know. The nice thing is it's not very deep, and since I'm putting it in that 5 series, the depth of that pan, having it not too deep is going to be pretty nice for ground clearance. So that's tight. Alright, so somebody's really put these on there pretty tight. God, I hope I don't break any of these off in there. Okay, right off the bat, you probably noticed that this 80E has a cast iron pump. Can you see that? So that's a heavy duty cast iron pump that you don't see really anymore nowadays. Let's just pop this pan off. Oh, that was stuck really good. Let's see what kind of evidence we have in here of any problems. It is dented really bad. That's why I either want to get a new pan or I want to dent this thing back. Dent it back down right there. It does have this goofy plug in there. Weird. I've never seen that before in my life. Granted, I'll be honest with you guys, I've never had a 4L80E apart, and I bet we find nothing wrong with this transmission. There's just a tiny bit of clutch material right there on the magnet, you know, not much really in the pan. I don't think we're going to see it. I'm already feeling good about my $100 purchase right here, because man, it looks good under here. Now before I do my in-play checks, there is in-play right there. I can feel it. It's not too tight. I want to make sure that that's about what I have when I put it back together. If I don't have that much in-play when I put it back together, then I got a problem. So we'll check to see what that measures. I'll show you how to do that. Alright, this thing's never going to return ever again. Throw it under the bench. Or I'll put it in the scrap pile in a minute. We'll remove our filter. On most of our other transmissions, this filter goes straight into the pump. Not so much on our 4L80E. It goes through a passageway right there. Also, it looks like we have a reusable pan gasket, so that's good. So I can just reuse that one after I clean it up. I'm probably just going to dent the pan back. You know me, I'm cheap. Alright, the wiring harness looks pretty good. Alright, so we just have to disconnect our pressure control solenoid. Alright. We'll remove the wiring harness clips. The wiring harness from the clips. And I always like to inspect it as I'm taking it apart, just so I know if I need to get a wiring harness or not. Okay. I'm liking the way the wiring harness looks. That's already pretty good. The only debris I see is right underneath where the opening is that we just had. It was open for years. So far, this is looking really good. However, look right here. There's a stop right there for the dipstick. The dipstick hole's right here, and the dipstick goes down there. I don't have a dipstick for a 4L80E. I do have this low-car one that I bought for my 4L60E that was in my my old setup, and I'm just kind of curious. Okay, so it does have a different part number for the 60E and the 80E, and it looks like if this were to be bottomed out all the way, that the fluid level isn't going to read properly. If this is bottomed out all the way, it would have to be all the way up to the actual pan level to be considered full. I'm assuming that the normal level inside that pan is probably going to be slightly below that. But really, I could use this dipstick and just, if it's halfway up the marks, then I'm good. I bet the other one's just longer and it sticks out that extra, I don't know what that is, about ½ an inch or so down to there. So if I just took the ½ inch off there and went to the middle of that, I bet I'm perfectly fine. And if it starts slipping, I'll just add a little bit more. Remember, I'm cheap. Plus, that's like $100 dipstick if I don't reuse it. Okay, so on this one, we have to remove the valve body. You can't get around it without removing the valve body. So I'll flip it up so we can see it. Now we do have this tube right here. This is a lubrication tube for the rear, that bearing at the very back of the transmission for this rear planetary right here. So we're going to have to remove this, then we'll remove the pressure switches, and then we'll remove the valve body and we'll take a look underneath. I like to keep all the bolts in their places so I don't forget which ones went where, if at all possible. And it's a good thing we're taking a video of it so I can now have proof of where everything went. As far as my clips, so I have a clip that goes right here, another clip that's right there. Alright, it looks like everything's a 10mm bolt. I don't know if it's like a 60 where they're different ones or not, because like I said, I've never taken an 80 apart. Okay, these are just hold down clamps. So once those are out of the way, see, this gets lubrication from the front of the valve body all the way back to this rear planetary. Definitely don't want that burning up. Looks like I can remove a bunch of the other bolts. Those are all 8mm that hold that on. I wonder if I can leave that on there. A lot more bolts to remove than our 6-speeds. The 6-speeds, you just had the 6 to remove before it all came apart. Okay, also on this wiring harness here, look. There's our fluid temperature sensor. They just pretty much zip tie it to the harness and it sits in the fluid. That's how it gets its temperature reading on this. Remove the detent for the manual valve over there. Oh, now we got spring pressure pushed up the valve body. I'm going to grab the spacer plate at the same time just in case there's any check balls in there. I know there's check balls, but I don't know if any of them are which side of the spacer plate they are or not. Okay. So here's my valve body. Set it aside. Now there are check balls in here. How many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 check balls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now it specifically says in service information not to use a magnet to pick up these balls. If we use the magnet into this, we could magnetize those steel balls and then any particles could end up sticking to them in the future and causing valve train issues. Have I ever actually seen it? No, but it's what it tells you to do in service information, so that's what we do. Now we have our accumulator piston right here. You can see there is a seal on there, and then there's a spring. This is actually a cushion spring, And if you put a stiffer spring in here, it will make the shift firmer. However, this is, I believe, the 1-2 accumulator. Ah, man, I need to look it up just to be safe. Don't quote me on this. But it's metal. It's not plastic like there is in the 4L60E. This thing's a stout piece. So you replace that seal right there whenever you do a rebuild. Underneath here, this is going to be our manual 2-1 servo. So this is the apply for the servo here. We'll talk about servos when we talk about bands. That might be part of the problem. There we go. I bet I could have put this transmission in there and not had a problem. Okay. I'm going to put those bolts in there to keep them safe. There's a gasket here. Look at this guy. All right. So there is some trash in there. And the piston. A little return spring in there. You can see there's a couple notches on this that indicate how long this pin is. All right. Now that pin actually reaches in here, and there's a band that applies in manual second and first. There's also going to be a reverse band in here, and I'm not 100% sure where the servo is on that one. I'll have to look it up. Okay, seeing as how this transmission was a replacement transmission, it was a Serta, and it doesn't look like this seal's leaking at all. I may not replace that seal. I don't know, we'll see. But in order to get it out, the shift shaft, there's a little nail right there instead of a roll pin. You got to pull that little nail out and then undo this little nut, and then you can take the manual shift shaft out in order to replace that seal. Okay, remember I was talking about the end play right here, this amount of play up and down. We're going to check that. I'll show you how. You guys probably remember me complaining about my digital dial indicator here, and it sucks. I hate this thing. I like the ones that we have up at the school a lot better, but it's what I got, so it's what I'm going to use. So hook it to that. Okay. This. All right, so that's on there nice and good. Alright, stop it. Alright, see we're at 0 right now? And it seems to be moving. Alright, if I lift up, 180, or it's 19 thousandths, about 20 thousandths, down to 3 thousandths, 20, down to 3.5. So actually about 17 thousandths, if I zero that out again, 17, 0, 17.5, half. Alright, so I'm about 17.5 thousandths on my in-play right there, which is absolutely perfect. It wants somewhere between, I think in the specs, we'll look it up, but I think it's about 5 to 25 thousandths, and we're dead nuts in the middle of that. So let's check our rear end play just to be safe. So on this transmission, you also have to set your rear end play. So there is some play one way or the other. And there's thrust washers inside that set this. If it's too tight, obviously all the gears are going to be pressed too tight, and then your bearings are going to wear. If it's too loose, everything's going to clunk because everything's going to move too much inside this transmission. Let's see, where do I want to hook up to this thing at? Yeah, that'll work. Alright, so I'm zeroed out. Here, let me push it all the way in. 0. And you see why I hate this thing. So 17.5 thousandths. Down to 2 thousandths. 0 out, push it in. Alright, 19.5 thousandths. I'm actually on the big end of spec on this one because I think it's about 5 to 20 thousandths. And I'm about 20 thousandths of in play. So I'll have to see, maybe go a little tighter on the in play on this one. We'll see what we have to do. So we'll write that down. Hey, the good news is doing this, I'm actually documenting all this stuff. So that's good. Alright, just to be clear, where we're at right now, I don't think is bad as far as in play. It's not detrimental. There actually is quite a bit though on the back. Maybe we can make it better. We'll have to see what our options are as far as that. Alright, back up here. Okay, just like our other transmissions, our rear wheel drive transmissions here, we have an O-ring right there for the torque converter clutch. that we need to make sure we get this O-ring off. I always like to pinch and push, and it makes it stick out. So if I do this, see, if you pinch it and push it, it kind of sticks out, so then you can get a screwdriver. And don't just throw it away. Save it so you can compare it to the O-ring that's going to be in our kit that we're going to look at later. So I like to set it in the pan, just so I don't forget it. Looks like we got 13mm bolts that hold the pump on, so we'll go ahead and take those out. Alright, now the pump bolts, they have little O-rings on them. So those little O-rings should come in the rebuild kit also. You can see this one, the O-ring didn't stay. This one, the O-ring came off and it didn't stay up in this bolt. I've seen twice, I think, maybe it was once or twice, where it would actually leaked out behind that seal because somebody didn't replace those and then get the pump perfectly centered. It was on a 60E, but it's just something to I always make sure the pump is actually centered, not cocked just a little bit and twisted, because you could run into problems. Oh, got another one. See, that O-ring liked to stick. So I always replace these. A lot of your GM rebuild kits actually come with brand new bolts on the 60Es. I don't know about the 80Es though. Okay, now they do make a special tool for pulling out this pump. It's in there, right? It's really in there. I don't have that special tool, so what I'm going to use is a pry bar. If you look through here, I can see a spot in the case. I can get to it. Pull that pump out. Oh my goodness. Really? Nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here. Just dropping stuff. Okay. So you can see it's a cast iron cover. Yet, oh no, is it cast aluminum? Maybe it's cast iron. Also, it's just not rusted because it's not exposed to the elements. Cast iron body of the pump. This thing's pretty stout. You can see we have a couple of seals right there, and this guy right here. This is our thrust washer, our selectable thrust washer, and this thrust washer, and you see it's color coded. This one's brown. Is what sets. It's what sets our in-play that we checked just a minute ago. So the thicker this washer is, the less in-play we have. So that's how that's set. But our in-play was perfect, so we shouldn't need to change that washer. Yeah, all these gaskets on this are very brittle and hard. They've been sitting with no fluid on them for a long time. I mean, if nothing else, that's a good reason that we're taking this thing apart. Like I said, judging by the way the pan is, I bet this thing would be perfectly fine. However, I sure would hate to put this in the car and then have to take it right back out. So now we can see we have a gasket that seals the pump and its passages to the rest of the transmission, right? So the pump has all these passages right here. Well, after it pumps the fluid, we can see where it goes. It goes to the rest of the transmission. I just washed my floor today and I'm throwing a whole bunch of stuff all over it, but oh well. So all these fluid passages lead to somewhere else in the transmission. And man, like I said, that is just, that gasket, it's a paper gasket and it is brittle. Oh, it's like a potato chip. So, you see all these things about vehicles that have no miles on them. And they're like, oh yeah, it doesn't ever get driven, it just sits. That's not good for gaskets and stuff. That's why vehicles, they're fine when they sit there, and as soon as you start driving them, they start leaking. Vehicles are not meant to sit. They're meant to be driven. Oh my goodness, that thing is, that's hard to get off. I'm going to wait till I get this thing empty before I try to take the rest of that gasket off. Now, this is going to be this turbine shaft right here. They call this the turbine shaft because it splines with the turbine inside the torque converter, right? This is your main input shaft to the transmission. You can hear the roller clutch in there squealing. All right, I think I'm just supposed to pull up on this. Let's see what happens. Okay. All right, so this is our overdrive carrier right here. This is our carrier that's used for overdrive. And every time I get something like this out, I like to take a look at the planetary gears and make sure that they're good. They are lock solid and don't want to move. I wonder why. So this clutch right here, this is going to be our overdrive clutch right there. And so basically the Turbo 400 and the 4L80 are the same transmission, except for a Turbo 400 is only a 3-speed. To turn it into a 4L80E, they added an extra clutch up here, which is basically an overdrive clutch. Now remember, you can get 2 forward and 1 reverse gear out of each one of these clutches. So ideally, out of each planetary. So since this thing has 3 planetary gear sets, ideally you can actually get 6 forward gears. 6 forward gears out of it. That's why TCI has made their 6L80, whatever they call it, the 6XL80 or whatever. So they actually reformulated a valve body and everything for it, and made their own 6-speed transmission out of the 4L80E right before GM came out with their own 6-speed transmission already. Alright, those planetaries don't want to move. And I think it's because the sun gear of this is on the inside of this roller clutch right here. So this thing has a roller clutch that in order to take it apart, we're going to have to pull the snap ring apart. Ooh, there's a set of clutches inside there. So there is a set of clutches inside there. That might be our input clutch. I need to take a look. We'll take a look at it and we'll talk about it in class. So the outside part gets basically brake to the housing. The outer part is a brake clutch, and the inside appears to be a driving clutch. So when we take all this apart, we'll see. There's a snap ring right here, and we can pull this planetary apart too to take a look at. Oh, you can see the input shaft. There's definitely a sun gear and it's driving them. We'll have to take it apart and take a look. That's that squealing we heard whenever I was turning that input shaft, and I'm 99% sure that's normal. Okay, we always want to take a peek. At our Torrington bearings here, our thrust bearings, we want to make sure these aren't worn out, and then also our bushings in here. So that bushing is really important because the fluid to actuate these clutches on the inside of this drum right here come through this passage right in there. And so that bushing seals right there, but if it has too much play, there's no way these Teflon seals are going to be able to seal good enough to hold that clutch on. So this right here, this is our 4th clutch, so this is going to be used for overdrive. So if your overdrive goes out, that's the clutch you're going to be looking at. And this clutch that's inside here is known as your overrun clutch. I believe it's used for engine braking whenever you're in manual mode on some of these. You got to remember, this is a heavy-duty transmission. All right, so in order to get the 4th clutch out of there, there is actually a bolt right here. This bolt needs to be taken out. It looks like a Torx bit. All right, T40, yep. They say do not reuse this bolt. So much like our center support that we had on our 6-speed transmissions that was held in with that humongous snap ring, this one is held in with this bolt. Now, this bolt is hollow. That bolt's hollow. It actually feeds that clutch through the hole in the case, through the hole that's in the bolt. So that's pretty neat. Like I said, they basically retrofitted a Turbo 400 for this use. So that would not come out until I removed that bolt, and you can see right there the hole that the bolt went through to feed the piston that actuates these clutches on the inside. That's pretty nifty, pretty cool. All right, what do we have next? Looks like we have our input speed sensor. You can see it right there. You see our input speed sensor? It reads off of the reluctor right here. because the input shaft should be turning this as the input. Now on a Turbo 400, it was pretty much, the shaft went straight to here because it didn't have any of the overdrive stuff. But on the 4L80, they add that extra, so now we have our input shaft speed stuff. So there's a special tool that reaches in here and pulls up on all this because it's pretty heavy. I'm going to risk life and limb pulling it out. Yeah, didn't need a special tool for that. All right, we'll inspect everything. All these gears, they're pretty beefy. Want to check our snap rings, look at our bushings. Those look fantastic. You can hear stuff inside there. Making a lot of noise. I'm going to have to take that apart, obviously, and take a look inside and see what I got. Let's see what that part is. Alright, this right here is our forward clutch assembly right here. This is our forward clutch assembly. So whenever this one's applied, the clutches that actually grab a hold right here, those are what actually drive the input of the transmission. All these parts are pretty beefy in this thing. Alright, now this is going to be our direct clutch assembly next. Again, there's also a special tool for removing this one. It's freaking heavy. Yep. Not much to grab a hold of. Oh. Alright, this is our direct clutch. Your direct clutch is whenever it's in direct drive, which means that it's in third gear, right? That's your 1-to-1 gear ratio. Also, there's a roller clutch right here. See, it moves in one direction and it locks in the other direction. You got to make sure that that works correctly in both directions. All right, this surface right here, there's a band in there. That band grabs hold of this surface whenever you are, I believe, in manual first or second. We want to take a look at this band and make sure it's not flaking and stuff. I probably should replace it just because it's been so long that it's been sitting in there. What in the world actuates that band? Wow. All right. Remember this, I told you this was a servo that, or this accumulator. This accumulator is also the servo that pushes on this band. Now this is just the cushion spring to make sure there's not a harsh apply right there. This is the manual 2-1 band. So when you have this thing in manual second and first, you pull that shifter into manual mode, it adds a little extra strength by applying this band. That's applied with this. Pretty cool stuff. Alright, there is a snap ring down there that's holding the rest of this in there. I'll have to get that snap ring out. And that, I believe, is going to be our intermediate clutch, which is going to be between first and, it's going to be your second gear, right? That's your intermediate gear. It goes, typically they used to, instead of calling it first, second, third, and fourth, well, hell, they actually had only first, second, and third when it was a Turbo 400. They called it the input gear, which was first, or forward. I think they went input, and then it's intermediate, then direct, because that's your 1-to-1. Then they added the overdrive or fourth gear after that. So that's kind of why they have these weird names instead of like we're used to on our 6-speeds of, you know, the 3.5R clutch, which makes perfect sense. Alright, we'll get the snap ring out of here. Luckily it's pretty lightweight. Alright, we got a snap ring to hold it in. I'm going to remove this pan off of here so I can get more room. You want to try to keep it all organized on your bench too. Alright, can we get this out? Okay, the actual clutches come out for that, for our intermediate clutches. So this is second gear. You can see actually the second gear clutch has a little bit of wear on it. I wouldn't say it's burned up, but it does have a little bit of wear. That's a little concerning. The fluid wasn't really burnt, but yeah, I don't necessarily like that. I'll have to see what's going on with that. Okay. Alright, then we have another snap ring in there that I believe is holding this output carrier in. It's probably something else that's heavy, to be honest with you. There we go. Okay, we'll pull the snap ring out, walk it around. Alright, so another snap ring. And as I'm putting these on the bench here, look, you know, like I was saying in class, we want to put snap ring. I pulled it out this way, I flip it over, I keep it together. The next snap ring, right? Well, that still doesn't pop out yet. And there's a shaft, but I don't think that's the one I'm ready for yet. I need to go look at SI. Consult SI. Right. Okay. Remember how we had that bolt holding the center support? We have another one here. Oh, that one's an external 12-point hex. Of course. Why wouldn't it be? Alright, so this bolt right here is a 12-point and it's 3/8 of an inch. Probably a carryover from when these things were Turbo 400s instead of just a 4080. Oh yeah, definitely. Alright, so this bolt right here, again, another one that has a hole through it to feed oil to lubricate that side. Ah, there we go. Okay, you can see the Teflon seals. You can see right here, this is where we feed oil from the valve body into that. And then on the newer ones, where I told you they had a different location for the Trainee cooler line, the cooler line also comes directly in there. So I guess they made some improvements as far as that goes. So this right here, one of these, I believe it's this one right here, this Teflon seal. I think we leave this one out whenever we reinstall this because it's what's called dual feeding the direct clutch. So it's kind of to add a little bit of extra strength to the direct clutch whenever you're putting it together. And you can see there's a little, ooh, that is not good. Oh, okay, never mind. Alright, so this is one of the races. I can see the rest of the bearing down in there. I'm like, ooh, that's not good. I don't like that. Okay, so the bearing just came into two pieces. I'll have to grab that and get it out of there. So here's a shim too. We want to make sure these shims are all good. Make sure our bushings aren't all worn out. So we take a look at our bushings. Something burns, do I have a splitter? So this intermediate carrier right here, output, I don't know if that's the output carrier, I'll have to see exactly what it's called. It's got some pretty beefy planetary gears there. We have a sprag in here. This right here is our is one of the sprags in the transmission. We'll talk about that in just a little bit too whenever we get this apart. And you can see right here, this is the surface that the band right there for low and reverse holds on to. Okay, there's actually a snap ring. That I believe is holding the rest of this in. Now, actually, we can pull the rest of the transmission out. All right. Let's see. The other side of that bearing that I thought was coming apart. So this bearing actually comes in 3 different pieces. You can see all the little rollers inside these Torrington bearings. I really don't know if it's supposed to be in 3 different pieces like that. I'll have to do a little bit of research and see. Yeah, I'll have to see whenever I put it all together. Okay, and you can see our sun gears here. We want to make sure there's no teeth missing or anything, and it all looks pretty good. So there's planetary gears in there, and there must be. So this is my output shaft. Uh-oh, that's not good. All right, this bushing right here is supposed to be in the case. This bushing came out with this. That's not good. I believe that's supposed to be staked into the case or something. It's weird. It's got a little stake mark in it right there. I'm gonna have to do a little digging again. All right, so there's that bushing on the output carrier. And then also this right here. This is going to be our thrust washer. This is going to be what sets the in-play for the rear. Remember I said the rear in-play was a little bit on the big side. So I'm going to have to see if I can find shims that are bigger to get our in-play where we want it. We measured almost at, what was it, 20 thousandths or so. And we were really close to that, and I think we probably want to set it a little bit tighter if I can find the spots. Ooh, I'm leaking. So we'll have to see that. I do need to find out about this output carrier bushing. So we'll do a little bit of research. You guys do some research, see what you find as far as this output carrier bushing, and it looks like, lost my dive light. It looks like somebody tried to stake it in there, you know, with a punch. I don't know if you can see that. But, yeah, I don't know. I'll have to see exactly what's going on now. It didn't look like it damaged really anything because it was still in the right spot. But I don't think that's supposed to come out of the case like that. I wouldn't expect it to, at least. Like I said, this is the first 4L80 I've ever been into, so we're all learning here together. Let's see what else we got in there. We almost got this whole thing completely torn down. I believe the only thing left in there is that band. See if I can pull that band out of there. That thing's a beast of a band, man. thing's like cast iron or something on the outside. That thing is a beast. And you can see right here, here's where it gets applied. So this anchors to the side of the case. There's actually a couple anchor bolts that go through the case that this sits on right here. And then on this side, that big old servo we took off of the valve body at the very beginning. Drain this thing. Not the cleanest I've ever had anything come apart, that's for sure. So you can see here, right there, where that big servo was, that's where this part of the band is sitting in there like that. And the servo pushes on, so this is anchored to the case on this other side, and then it pushes on this spot right here, which then squeezes this drum right here when it's in reverse. Whenever this thing is in reverse, it's going to squeeze that and stop it from turning, and therefore then there's a one-way sprag right here. So we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth. Okay, see this one right here? There's actually a snap ring right there. I thought that was going to be a roller bearing or something supporting the back of that. No, that's where that bushing that we just found is resting. So it's actually a bushing that it is holding that output shaft. Very similar to a 4L60E, but that bushing had fallen out. So that's a little scary. Good thing we found that and we took it apart, because that may have caused some serious issues down the road. So far I don't see anything alarming. Next time we visit this transmission, we're going to take apart the sub-assemblies. All right. When we get into these sub-assemblies, we're going to do each one individually, and we're going to take a look to see if we see any problems with each one. The only one I'm actually concerned with right now is going to be our intermediate clutch, which was for second gear, because those are the ones that had the clutch plates that looked like they were a little burned. However, in all fairness, I didn't take apart the other ones yet. I haven't looked at those clutches.